Hello everyone, I'm Hannah from the BNA and I'd like to welcome you to our second event as part of our public Festival of Neuroscience, which is what we call BYOB, Bring Your Own Brain. So the first event, this event today is the Detangling the Knots. So we're just going to give people a minute or two to join the session. I can see people are attending right now. So our public Festival of Neuroscience is a series of events which is to bring neuroscience to the general public in what we hope is a really fun and engaging way. So I'm now going to hand over to the lovely team from Detangling the Knots, who will introduce themselves and the session. Perfect.
Hello and welcome to Detangling the Knots, our virtual tour. I'm Barbara Touati-Evans. I'm a textile artist and installation artist. And I'll just tell you briefly what we're doing before I let my colleagues introduce themselves. So first, we're going to have a tour of our exhibition. That's going to be about 10 minutes. Then this will be followed by us three artists just talking about each other's work. Then we will have some interviews between the artist and the scientist, and then at the end we'll take some questions from the public. So I'm just going to let Susan introduce herself now.
Hi, I'm Susan Merrick. I'm a British Sign Language interpreter and artist, and I collaborated on the project with Barbara. She invited me to be involved to do some film work and some performance work, and we were involved throughout the project really in terms of research and developing work. I'll hand over to Mel.
Hello, I'm Melanie Ray and I'm one of the artists and I'm a graphic designer, and I've known Barbara for several years and I've done some other design work for her, and she invited me to support her in this project and the visual presentation of it and the publicity, and also gave me the opportunity to contribute some artwork as well. Sandrine, to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Sandrine Vienrovic. I'm a neuroscientist from the University of Southampton. In my work, I use stem cells derived from healthy people or Alzheimer's patients to grow them in a dish and grow them to become mature and differentiated neurons. And I got involved in the project with Barbara at really its conception stage when I met Barbara at a neuroscience conference in Southampton. So I hand over to Mariana.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mariana Vargas-Caballero. I'm a researcher at the University of Southampton, and I met Barbara in an Alzheimer's Research UK public event where we shared our appreciation for crochet neurons. And in this project, I have provided my understanding of the study of Alzheimer's disease and my love for electrophysiology. So I hope that you enjoy our event. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So before we show the tour, so yeah, Mel's going to show the tour. I just thought I'd give you just a little bit of context about it. So basically, the tour is of our exhibition called Detangling the Knots, and that was our exhibition took place last year in the summer in August at Red House Museum in Christchurch in Dorset. So we were very lucky to actually squeeze our exhibition in between the various lockdowns, because we were not sure whether we were going to be able to do it. And the focus of the project really it was to bring together the different strands of dementia. So obviously the research strands, because we were able to engage and spend some time with neuroscientists from the University of Southampton, and also the other side of dementia, which is people who live with the illness, with the condition, and their family, when we were able to do some workshop with them. And then the final thing I thought I would tell you about the project before we show the tour, which is the title, Detangling the Knot. Some of you might wonder where it comes from. So really, it comes from the Tangles that neuroscientists observe in the brain of people who have the condition. And for me, as an artist who work with wool, who work with yarn, I just thought that was such a sort of rich imagery, so full of possibility, of creative possibility for the project. So that is where that comes from. So I'm just going to let Mel show the tour now.
Okay, so everyone else is going to turn their video off. And I will turn mine off as well, and it will start momentarily.
Mel, I think we need to start the video again with the sound. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with us here. Melanie, you were muted, so I think that's why the sound wasn't coming through. So yeah, perfect.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. I'll
Here we go. Round two. That's fine.
Start it again. Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry, here we go.
Something that I really like about this specific field of work that we do is that not only do you get to see them, but you're effectively being able to touch them, to interact with them. Something that I really like about this specific field of work that we do is that not only do you get to see them, but you're effectively being able to touch them, to interact with them.
except my photos. effectively being able to touch this.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you very much. I also was going to mention, because we didn't do that at the beginning, if you have any questions that you want to ask us at the end, if you could start putting them in the chat, and hopefully we will come back to that. So now that we've seen the film, I thought we would do for the artists talk about each other's work. So I can start talking about Melanie's work, if she doesn't mind maybe putting up the first picture of her work. So there's 3 different works that Melanie contributed on her own, as well as lots of other work. So the first one is the typographic tangle, if she can find it, which is the sign.
Yeah, that's the wrong.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
She can find the sign.
The wrong one. Sorry.
That's okay. You can already see some tangles behind Mel.
Clicking that one, I don't know why it's not. Maybe, okay.
Is it not bringing it up?
It keeps, oh, it's doing it now. Okay, sorry. Right. 0 to, there we go.
Thank you. So that's the first piece of work. Maybe everybody can mute themselves. Yeah, thank you. That's the first piece of work that I wanted to talk about. So it is called Typographic Tangles by Melanie Ray. And it was the first thing really that people could see in the exhibition, because it was the sign for the exhibition. And originally, when we had talked about this, we just thought maybe we will just do a simple kind of paper sign. And Mel came up with this idea throughout the project of maybe experimenting with wire. So in terms of material, it's actually made of wire that she then shaped in letters, and then she crocheted over it. So really, it was all of Mel's work, sort of experimenting with this technique. And I just really love how she explored once again this idea of tangles, which are sort of recurrent throughout the exhibition and throughout the project. And she explored it through the medium of typography. And what I really loved about it when she showed it to me at the installation was, so not only there was the words, but there was those kind of, you know, coming out of the words, all those tangles themselves. And when we installed it, we sort of made sure that the tangles themselves, we can't see there in the photo, but in the tour you were able to see how the sort of they sort of go, the tangles sort of start with the actual kind of main installation. It's all linked together. So that was really cool. So maybe if you show me the next piece of work, Mel, which is okay, so this one is it's entitled Grandma, and it's a very personal piece of work for Mel, because it was literally about her own grandmother who had dementia, and who lived with Mel and her family when she was growing up. And in terms of the inspiration, I think it came to her when we were doing the workshops with people living with the condition. I think it just really reminded her of her own grandmother. And I don't know, you probably can't see very well just there in the photo, but it sort of reads on it. It's written with like bits of wool. It says, "I think she thought we were imprisoning her, and that she was in some kind of alternate reality. She tried to escape." So it's just a really moving sentence, really, and it's meant to be sort of looked at from the left to the right, and I think Mel was really trying to explore, I suppose, her own feelings towards her grandmother, remembering her. and sort of peeling each layer as a sort of each, you go from one photo to the next, trying to unpeel her and feeling her unpeel how she remembers her grandmother. And basically just looking at how dementia can really sort of disrupt the connections that people have with their loved ones, and I suppose remove a sense of self. Thank you, Mel. If we could show the last piece of work. So this one, it was just entitled What's Good for the Brain. And that came from conversations we had with all the neuroscientists, but mainly with Mariana, in terms of what's the really important subject, core message that she wanted to share with the public. And the core subject was, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. So Mel very cleverly came up with a sort of very striking way to communicate that, and I believe in terms of feedback from the exhibition that was very well received, because it was a very positive message. And that is me in terms of Mel's work. So I'm going to let Susan talk about my work.
Hi everyone. I can't remember what image is going to come up first. Let's have a look. Okay, so Barbara mainly asked me to talk about this piece of work, which is the main installation in the exhibition, which is called A Collective Brain from Growth to Degeneration. So I will talk about that, but I also want to talk a little bit about Barbara's side to the performance we did together. So Barbara's installations are always crochet based, using wool, and they're often large scale, but I think this is one of the largest installations of Barbara's that I've seen. And she develops them on site, so they are specific to where they are being put up, but also very much based and embedded in the research that she's done and the research of the project. So in this particular installation, it begins at the beginning of the tour of the exhibition. And when we had this exhibition set up, we had to consider social distancing, and everything had to be one way. So you could only come into the exhibition one way and out another way. So Barbara used the main installation as almost a journey through the exhibition. So it begins with these very thin threads of wool, works its way through with almost like parts of the process of the project intertwining with the wool installation. So we have the flasks from the neuroscientists representing the time that we spent researching in the labs with the scientists, the times we spent with them, and then moving through to work done by the participants in the workshops. And as you move through the installation, the crochet becomes thicker, you get thicker chains, eventually leading to this huge mass you can see on the screen of tangles, which were representing the process of degeneration through the brain in the case of people with dementia. So I'm going to have a little look. Barbara sent me a few notes to help me, which I think would be useful to look at. So it was, as I said, it was about honouring these lab processes that we witnessed, where the scientists we saw were actually growing neurons in order to investigate dementia. It's a real slow process, very repetitive, very meditative. We found when working in the lab, there's so much care taken from the scientists that as artists we wanted to represent that, and that's what Barbara was focusing on a lot with the crochet and how she created this installation. There's also parts of the work Barbara used rose petals. I don't know if we could move to that slide now. And in these rose petals, Barbara used crochet within them, these very, very fragile objects, and having to crochet minutely throughout them because she wanted to have a look, as well as this macro idea of large scale crochet, to reflect on how the neurons tangle, also to think about the fragility of the way the scientists are working and the fragility of the brain in general. With all of it, as Barbara says, it's almost like a flow of information, and that flow getting clogged up and that information stopping and the disconnections happening. And very quickly before we move on, because I know we've got quite a tight schedule, I wanted to mention that when we quickly look at the performance work that Barbara and I did, in the film that we created, Barbara focused on the sound and I focused on the footage. And the sound work, which is the sound piece that we've just heard through the tour of the exhibition, you'll hear so many different layers to it, which Barbara added over time. Some of it is sound from that we recorded during the sessions, the labs, so some of the scientists talking, some of the words that were spoken during the workshops with the people living with dementia, and which Barbara used within the music. And you'll have heard at times that the sound started to almost fragment and become disconnected from itself, so the flow changed. It didn't always feel in time, and Barbara kept that intentionally, because it really started to represent that disconnect that we found happened for people who were living with dementia, where sometimes the neurons were trying to fire and it just wasn't connecting anymore. And it was, really, it was a really powerful soundscape to work with. I hope that's covered enough of your work there, Barbara.
So I'm going to talk about Susan's work. So obviously Susan said a little bit about some of her work, but so she worked on the performances, several performances, and the films which were projected. Sorry, let me press my space bar. Oh, that's the bottles. Performances and films that were projected onto the artists during the performances. So the one you saw in a tiny bit of in the video was Remember, Forget, so that was a recording of a performance with the film in the background. You can see the full video on our website if you want to see the whole thing. So as Susan said, she spent a lot of time in the labs, and the thing that really was important to her was listening and observing and watching and seeing how seeing the conversations that were taking place in the workshops, and she collected a lot of footage in those to record what she was seeing and hearing. And in the workshops, with the messages in the bottle, it was really about bringing, a lot of the projects being about sort of trying to bring together the science and art and those feelings. Susan spent a lot of time trying to understand how people were feeling who have the condition, and putting some of those comments in some of the bottles that are used in the lab. Listening and observation and conversations are a very important part of Susan's work. And as she said, the things that stood out to her were the slowness of a lot of the processes in the lab, and the care that's taken, and the repetitive nature of a lot of it, and also in the workshops. And for me, I feel that also reflects the patience that's needed for the family and for carers who are living with dementia, and the challenges that brings, and having to repeat yourself, and really needing that patience. Scale was always also really important to Susan. Obviously, a lot of the things in the lab are minuscule, looking through microscopes, but the fact that the scientists could touch the cells, and people's hands in workshops making crochet, and she really wanted to convey all of that in the films. She spent a lot of time editing, working with Barbara's sound, and linking the visuals to the meditative soundscape. And she used footage from the labs and the workshops, and some that she created, and found footage, and some that she created herself, such as the remember word that was coming away with the threads, and water on sugar dissolving to show the sort of disconnection and breakdown of things. And she also included, some of the voices of some of the workshop participants and her mum, a conversation with her mum where she looked at the basic memory test that GPs use, and then discussing that. So, and as she said, the performances were quite meditative, and they were, focused on their, on what they were doing and making the crochet chains, and the sound and the wool and the projected footage, but also having to sort of come out of that and remember to focus on each other and look at what each other were doing. And obviously the COVID restrictions changed the performances a lot, because they were originally supposed to be in person, but obviously it led to a lot of added layers of meaning, really, because of them having to be disconnected and having to try and communicate through these through internet connections and channels that are not always reliable, and in the way that they sort of come in and out of the picture, to me feels quite like when you're losing and seeing a person or not, they kind of come and go. So yeah, in some ways that those challenges created extra things. Oh, and yeah, and the idea of sort of separation, the isolation that people can feel. So yeah, I think Susan's emphasis on listening and observation really show in her work, and she seeks to present personal experiences to the audience. And I really admire how she is so comfortable using herself being part of the work, and Barbara as well, and the way that brings a real sort of human touch to the scientific footage. And yeah, and in many ways the work's quite bold and striking, but there's a huge amount of sensitivity and care for people that comes through in this, dealing with a difficult subject, which makes it really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mel. So now we're going to go into the interview between artist and scientist, and Mariana is going to start by asking me a question.
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions prepared, and they interlink beautifully with two questions from our audience. So I'm going to phrase them as the audience, because they really bring up a quite interesting material. So the first question is, how did the project come about, and how you as the artist were brought together? And it also adds this element of how did the relationship with the neuroscientists start?
Right, okay. So the first question was, how did the project come about, isn't it? So the project had quite a long development, really, because it sort of came about from very, very early days of reading an article in a national newspaper about neuroplasticity. So this idea of the brain being able to just change its shape throughout its life according to the experience that we had. So that was like the very, very early days of the project. And then I did do a different project called Mindshape, where I wasn't working with neuroscientists yet, and I really, really wanted to sort of continue that and work with neuroscientists. So I went to this neuroscience conference where I met Sandrine again. And then it sort of came from that, from Sandrine and I talking, and her telling me about her work with stem cells, and then just deciding, I suppose the main problem with the project was neuroscience is just so interesting, so fascinating. It was about focusing it really tightly. And then after quite a lot of deliberation, then decided to work with, in the dementia sort of area. So I think that does cover, isn't it? How did the project come about? What was the other question?
The second part of that first question was, how did the relationship with the neuroscientists start? I think you kind of have covered it, but maybe if you can say a couple more things about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah. So first of all, so Sandrine was my first point of contact, and we had met in a different context, in a sort of like French sort of art context. So that it started with Sandrine, and then Sandrine was very keen to involve other neuroscientists, and then we sort of put it out at an open call. And like you said before, Mariana, I met you at this event, wasn't it? Alzheimer Research UK. And then we both discovered, obviously you can crochet, and you had all those crochet neurons with the very, very long, like to scale fiber. And then so I think, yeah, that's kind of how it developed from that. Is that does answer?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so one other part, it's another question. It's essentially, how do you think that this project is going to influence your art later? Is the science going to continue influencing your art beyond this project?
I think so. I mean, definitely in terms of, so that was the first time I really engaged in science, and it really demystified it for me. It made it much less scary. It also made it much more fascinating. So I think I have really started to engage with science, you know, with sort of general science, and not just neuroscience, but all sorts of topics in science in a really different way. I'm much less scared, even if I don't understand everything. And that's, I think, the really important thing in terms of public engagement. And I think I definitely would like to in the future do more science in a variety of topic. Definitely. At the moment, I'm definitely thinking about the effect of cold water, when you swim in cold water, what effect that has on the body and on the brain. And I have started to pick up on things. So yes, it has completely changed my perspective on my relationship with science. And I think a lot of artists are engaging with science. It's almost like its own, it is becoming a lot less niche, I think. For artists to engage in science. I mean, especially, I suppose, with the pandemics, but not just that. I think beforehand, yeah. Does that answer the question, Mariana? Yeah.
I mean, wait, please give us your feedback. Those of you who asked the questions, but for me, I think that's very nice to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. So should I go to the next bit, which is me asking you a question? So the first question I have for you, Mariana, is what artistic interest has been brought up in your work as a result of taking part in this project? Are there any lab practices that could be considered artistic? So that's the sort of two first questions.
That's a very interesting question. I think that, you know, science, in the end, we want to get to a really formal answer when we are doing an experiment. But what this project has really, you know, reminded me is that there is so much creativity in the ways that we solve technical problems. You know, in order to record from brain cells, from neurons, we really need to access tiny little plates with thousands of or millions of neurons inside, and we really need to solve many technical problems. And in order to do that, we use our creativity, we become really proficient, and all of those things are really, you know, artistic to do that. And once we're able to solve those problems, we can access this amazing beauty, either of shapes of neurons or even their electrical signals that they communicate with each other. So certainly what this project has helped me with is to remind myself of how much beauty and creativity there is in the work that I do.
Amazing. Thank you, Mariana. And do you think that you've covered that? I can go to the sort of next question. Yeah. So the next question is a lot more about your research, which is, what are the key messages you want to communicate to the public about your research?
Excellent. I'm going to be very brief here so that we can move on to the next part, but I think that they were covered really beautifully, both in the video and in the discussion. And one of them is to highlight to the public that we know dementia is not a normal part of aging. It is an illness. And we both are understanding what's happening. We have a lot of clues of what's going on, and so we're studying how to get to a cure. But at the same time, we also deeply care about the patients. The other aspect is essentially that if you look after your heart, you're going to be looking after your brain, and that was beautifully represented by Mel's work. So thank you very much. I hope that the whole world sees that. Excellent.
Thank you, Mariana. So I'm going to let Mariana ask the next question to Susan.
Yeah, so I'm going to be asking Susan. Susan, if you can tell us how you got involved in the project, where did you come in?
Okay, yeah. Well, Barbara and I had worked together on we'd come together. I think Barbara sought me out actually, and she was interested in work that I was doing locally. We were both interested in adapting our work in some way. So I was working with live art and performance, and Barbara was working solely with crochet and installation. And we were both really intrigued by how the other person worked. So we started coming together and just having time to practice our work together, which basically involved Barbara teaching me to crochet with my hands, large scale, and then and me showing her how not to be afraid of then involving your body within that. So that's how it started, and we've developed several performances together, revolving around care and being women, and using the large scale crochets as ways to think about social issues. And so Barbara asked me to be involved in this project so that I could use my film experience, but also in order to develop some performance work that would really allow us to think about the research that we were doing in a way that we could use publicly.
Thank you, Susan. That's really, really exciting. And do you think that the future work that you will do will be influenced by the science that you have kind of come in contact with?
Yeah, so you shared this question with me to prep a little bit previously, which I haven't done. I haven't prepped at all. But when I first saw it, I panicked a bit. I was like, has the science affected my practice? But it really has, not just the science, but the project in general, I think, because I would say that previously science was probably a topic that I wouldn't have touched with my work. I was focused more on political or social issues, but by coming into the labs and spending time with you all, and then creating this project, developing the project, I got really excited, as you say, by how creative the scientific process is, how creative you have to be within the labs all of the time, but also how that need, as you say, for communicating what appears initially to be incredibly complex. Well, it is incredibly complex, but issues that I would have avoided because I thought were incredibly complex suddenly become accessible when you start thinking about them through an artistic project, not only through the visual means, which art can do, which so many scientists are already working with, but the social side of art that I like to practice with, so working with communities and working with people and making something that can then engage with an audience. It almost offers a conduit. It becomes like a conduit between the scientific world and the lay world, and that's got me excited. So I think it's affected my practice across the board, really, yeah, in terms of opening up scope, but also being excited about what art practice can do.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. I will leave you to interview Sandrine, but before that, I want to say that listening to both yourself and Barbara saying that science is accessible is just music to my ears. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Sandrine.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, please, can you tell us, first of all, how you got into the project or why you got into the project?
So I got involved in the project when I met Barbara at a neuroscience conference, as it was already mentioned. And I really wanted to combine our expertise in neuroscience and art to generate some outreach and public engagement events. And I thought it would be a good way for me to be involved in outreach. And I hope that our collaboration could give rise to something a bit different than just me talking about my research. Sometimes as neuroscientists and scientists in general, we're just a bit stuck in the complexity of the science and its specialized words. And so having to explain our science to artists was a challenge first, but it was really great to see how the artists have digested all the details we talked about, and how you created original artistic composition that in the end we as scientists can also use to present our work to the public. So it's really a win-win collaboration, I think.
Thank you, Sandrine, that's excellent. So you mentioned briefly there about talking about your own work. Please could you tell us what your research is and how the exhibition reflected your work, if it did?
Yeah, so I use stem cells derived from either healthy people or Alzheimer patients to grow them in a dish and grow them to become mature neurons and differentiated neurons. And this is to model some aspects of what happens in a brain, either healthy or affected by Alzheimer's disease, for example. And with this method, we can really see what happens at cellular and network level in a very early stage of the disease before the symptoms would start to appear. So in the exhibition, really, it was really through your visits to our labs and you trying to understand our research and seeing what equipment we used and what data, what picture we collected. And so you, Barbara, used the theme of growth to describe my research as I grow neuron in the lab. And this is reflected with the flasks and the tubes that were used in the exhibition, as well with the growing network with the big installation in red wool across the whole exhibition, forming knots at the end. Like the tangles that are forming in Alzheimer's disease patients' brain.
Thank you, Sandrine. I will hand over to you now to ask Mel a couple of questions.
Hi, Mel.
Hi.
So I would like to ask you, what have you enjoyed the most about the project?
I think there's been lots of things. For me, it's just been a great opportunity to be involved and to get the chance to step out and put some of my artwork in an exhibition. And it's been really interesting. It's not something I would have thought to do with the science, so that's been really interesting. And I think it was interesting how almost people who aren't scientists feel a bit afraid of not understanding, start feeling like we can't understand science and we might say something wrong or get it wrong. And almost the same with art, sometimes people can feel like, oh, it's this thing that I don't understand. And so it's good to sort of break down some of those boundaries in a way. And yeah, I think thinking about, again, I'd not really thought about scientific things, and just amazing to learn more about the neurons and how your brain works, and as a graphic designer, thinking about messages getting through and the words, and that's been really interesting. And yeah, it's been really good for me reflecting on my relationship with my grandma, and it's brought something of that out in me, and I really hope that it's been something where other people can reflect on relationships and and take some space to think about how it affects them, and understand that it is a disease and that it's not, it isn't the person's fault, they're not doing it deliberately, and it isn't that person, that that they, the disease has affected their behaviour. And so yes, yeah, those have been some of the good things.
That's great, thanks. And what has been more challenging in this project for you?
I think the biggest challenge was probably the whole COVID situation and not being able to get together in person and work together on things and having to work quite separately. That's also had positives in a way because of, you know, we've overcome those obstacles creatively, and it led to the Zoom recordings and things. But yeah, I think that's been hard, and things being cancelled and postponed, and it's, you know, it's just we've not known what's happening a lot of the time, or then it's last minute, and so that's been challenging. And the website, we've ended up with a website which wasn't part of the original plan, but you know, I ended up putting quite a lot of my time into that, which yeah, I would have rather have been putting my time into other creative things, but again, there's positive aspects. I think one of the other challenges is just you know, it is a difficult subject to talk to people about, and even in the workshops, and you know, people who don't have any personal experience of dementia don't necessarily really want to think about it or have any reason to, and then people who don't necessarily want to dwell on it or talk about it either. It's not a very positive thing. So I think there are challenges in terms of just getting people to want to come to an exhibition, and but I hope our work has made it interesting and you know, help people to connect with it, and as I say, created a space where we can explore feelings and also hopefully give some of the positive messages and how we can look after our brains as well.
Thank you.
So now I have to ask you a question, Barbara, which you've already answered a little bit, which is about, have you thought about your next art science project, or what's next for you?
Yeah, I have kind of already, somebody from the public was asking that, isn't it? So I suppose, yeah, I have definitely started thinking about this this cold water swimming, because in lockdown I started doing wild swimming, like a lot of people in this country, in the UK. So that, yeah, that might be something I look at. I've also been exploring looking at this material, this material that you can grow. It's like a sort of yeast and bacterial culture that you grow in tea, with a kombucha culture, it's called, and you can make a material that can be considered a bit like a sort of vegetal leather. So those are the two things, but they're very much just in my head. And yeah, we will see what happens. But I definitely have opened up my relationship with science, a scientist and artist who work with science, and scientists and artists who don't work with science, like yourself and Susan. I think that's maybe what's been the most exciting for me, is that you've taken part, even though that was completely out of your what you would normally do. So that's, yeah, that's been super exciting. I wonder whether we should take, there was maybe one question, because we've got a couple of minutes, haven't we? I'm just looking through the question of the from the public. I think most of the questions we've answered, but there is this one which I thought I would put out, which is somebody say, I am interested in how you establish relationships with user groups, people living with dementia. Should I answer that one? Or yeah. So the main groups of people, that we work with in terms of people living with the condition is, so we worked with some people at Red House Museum in Christchurch. And what we were really lucky about is that Red House Museum was, they were establishing their own project to work with people, with older people. So they were like a really good place to work with. And basically they helped us recruit the participants, which some of them were participants who were taking part in their own projects. and they help us advertise it and recruit the participants. And we very quickly filled up the spaces. And we found that in Christchurch, the people who came were mainly, they were partners, like carers and their partners who was living with the condition. So that's what it was for Christchurch. And then we also had some workshops in Farnborough, in Rushmore, which is where Susan, Mel and I are based. And for that, I went to a Centre for Health. So because I do quite a lot of work in mental health, I had some contact. And that contact put me in touch with somebody at the Centre for Health, which is like a sort of big GP practice and other kind of outpatient services. And they put me in touch with the older people unit. And we had a lovely manager there who was really supportive and who offered us, a room and who helped us recruit people. And the people we got there, they were quite different. They were mostly people who lived on their own. They didn't come with carers, and then we also had quite a lot of the staff from the Centre for Health who were involved in the sessions. So that was quite a different feel, but quite interesting. So I hope that answers the question from the person, and I think that's it, because otherwise all the other questions I think we've answered.
There is a question in the chat from Louise. She's asking if the artists have any plans to explore other diseases, such as Parkinson or Huntington disease, for example.
That's a really good question, but I haven't actually thought about it for the moment at all. I am hoping that I will continue my relationship with neuroscientists, and I am hoping that I would still like to go to neuroscience conferences and neuroscience events. So no, that's a very good point from a member of the public. But yeah, not yet, not yet. Unless Melanie and Susan want to contribute.
No, not at the moment.
I as I said before, I hadn't even thought that I would work with science, but Barbara and I have talked a little bit about, thinking about our practice a little bit more with regard to, cold water swimming and the effect of that on the brain. We're both really interested in that. But I think there's so much within this subject itself left to explore, I think. I know that after a lot of project planning, Barbara definitely needs a break for a bit. But I, for example, got really excited when I was in the labs talking to most of the scientists, I think, which people who know me wouldn't be surprised about women within research and about women's brains within research and the lack of data, gendered data within research. So that's an area I'm specifically interested in, not for right now, but yeah, in the future.
I thought of something else as well. Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. In terms of other illnesses, I think depression is an area I have a lot of interest because I do quite a lot of workshops in mental health, and depression is obviously quite a widespread one. I think people have got maybe a lot more of an understanding about that, and possibly linking it with cold water swimming, because there is quite a link. So maybe maybe depression. Is that it? Do we think maybe for rounding things up? Yeah.
So I think that's all the questions. A massive thank you from us all at BNA. That was great. It was really enjoyable to see the crossover between science and art, and what science can learn from art and what art can learn from artists, can learn from scientists. Very, very enjoyable. And again, a massive thank you to the team at Detangling the Knots for taking the time to share your project with us.
Having us.
Having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.